When I told my dad I worked in flight simulation at the secure military base, he scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "So you just teach simulators? Basically playing advanced video games while real pilots risk their lives." He laughed, turning back to his weekend barbecue. Beside him stood his lifelong best friend, Marcus, a battle-hardened, active-duty Navy SEAL commander who had survived some of the most brutal covert operations in modern history. I looked my dad dead in the eye and shook my head calmly. "No, Dad, I fly the real thing. I operate the classified high-altitude stealth drones that clear the path for the ground teams." My dad chuckled, completely unconvinced. "Oh yeah? If you're such a big-shot tactical pilot, then what's your call sign?" I leaned forward and said 2 words: Shadow Watch. Instantly, Marcus choked on his drink, dropping his glass. The decorated Navy SEAL turned completely white, his hands visibly shaking as he whispered, "No way. She's the one." He knew exactly who I was. My name is Lauren Hayes, and at 28 years old, I have spent the last 6 years of my life operating in a world that officially does not exist. To the outside world, and especially to my family, I am just a low-level systems administrator working out of a windowless, air-conditioned building at a secure military installation. When I pulled into the gravel driveway of my childhood home in Sacramento for our family's summer barbecue, I already knew exactly what to expect. My father, a retired Marine sergeant who measured a person's worth by the mud on their boots and the calluses on their hands, was standing by the grill, king of his domain. He looked up as my car door slammed, a familiar, patronizing grin spreading across his weathered face. "Look who finally left her computer screen," he called out, wiping his hands on a grease-stained apron. For years, my family treated my military career like a running joke. To my dad, if you weren't holding a rifle on the front lines, you weren't really in the military. He genuinely believed my daily routine consisted of running basic software updates and teaching rookie pilots how to navigate virtual menus on flight simulators. I usually just smiled and let him talk, bound by a strict non-disclosure agreement that carried a heavy prison sentence if violated. But today was going to be completely different, because the guest of honor arriving in just a few minutes was about to shatter that illusion forever. The gravel crunched outside, and a sleek black truck pulled into the driveway. The moment Marcus stepped out, the entire energy of the yard shifted. At 42, he looked like a statue carved out of granite, his posture perfectly rigid and his eyes scanning the perimeter out of pure muscle memory. He was an active-duty Navy SEAL commander, a man whose real name was scrubbed from most public databases, and my dad's ultimate hero. My dad practically ran over to greet him, slapping him on the back with a level of reverence he had never once shown me. "Marcus, the man, the myth," my dad boomed, handing him a cold drink. "We were just talking about the military. I was telling Lauren here that she's lucky she got the tech assignment. No dirt, no danger, just air-conditioned simulator rooms." Marcus gave a polite, tight-lipped smile, his sharp eyes briefly darting toward me before settling back on my father. My dad chuckled, thoroughly enjoying his own joke, and poked the embers of the grill. "Seriously, Marcus, tell this girl what real deployment looks like. She thinks pulling an 8-hour shift in front of a monitor is exhausting. Try doing a night drop into hostile territory." I stood by the patio table, quietly sipping my water, watching the two of them. The urge to speak up was clawing at my throat, hotter than the grill fires. For months, I had been living a double life, spending my nights in a classified command capsule, steering multi-million-dollar stealth assets through active crossfire to keep guys exactly like Marcus alive. I looked at Marcus, wondering if he had any idea that the invisible lifeline his teams relied on in the dark was operated by people he just dismissed as desk jockeys. My dad turned back toward me, his arms crossed over his chest, fully expecting me to shrink back down into my usual quiet compliance. "Come on, Lauren, admit it," he pressed, a smirk playing on his lips as he tried to get Marcus to join in on the teasing. "If you're out there flying the real thing like you claim, you'd at least have something to show for it. Every real pilot has a name earned in the sky. So, what's your call sign? Or do simulator instructors just go by their employee ID numbers?" The teasing had gone far enough. I set my water glass down on the wooden table with a deliberate, echoing click. The constant secrecy, the exhausting night shifts, and the heavy burden of keeping my mouth shut while being treated like a coward inside my own home finally broke through my restraint. I stepped out from under the shade of the patio awning, walking directly up to the grill until I was standing right between them. I looked my dad dead in the eye, my posture mirroring the rigid military discipline I practiced every single day. "Shadow watch," I said, my voice completely flat, devoid of any hesitation. The silence that followed was instantaneous and deafening. My dad blinked, his smirk faltering as he prepared to crack another joke, but he never got the chance. Beside him, Marcus froze entirely. The seasoned Navy SEAL commander went rigid, his knuckles turning white as his hand began to visibly tremble. The glass he was holding slipped right through his fingers, shattering against the concrete patio floor, spilling ice and liquid everywhere. Marcus didn't even look down at the mess. His face drained of all color, turning a ghost-like, terrifying shade of pale as he stared at me in absolute horror. "No way," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking as he took a step back. "No way. She's the one." My dad stared at his best friend in utter bewilderment, the grill spatula hanging loosely in his hand. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" he asked, his voice dropping its mocking tone entirely. "It's just a ridiculous nickname she probably made up for her computer games." Marcus didn't answer him. He kept his eyes locked on me, breathing heavily as if he were looking at a ghost. He took a deep, trembling breath and turned to my father, his voice raw with an intensity I had never heard before. "You don't understand, Tom," Marcus whispered, shaking his head. "Shadowwatch isn't a game. It's the classified tactical call sign for the single most elite drone operation unit in the entire United States Air Force. To guys like me on the ground, Shadowwatch is a legend. We don't know their names, we don't know their faces, but we know their voice." Marcus turned back to me, the sheer reverence in his eyes making the backyard feel incredibly small. He looked at my dad, his expression deadly serious. "6 months ago, my team was pinned down in a valley outside of Jalalabad," Marcus said, his voice dropping into a hushed, reverent tone. "We were completely surrounded, heavily outnumbered, and running dangerously low on ammunition. The terrain blocked our radio signals, and our command center had completely lost our location. We were sitting ducks, just waiting for the enemy to close in and finish us off." Out of nowhere, this incredibly calm, steady voice broke through our localized emergency channel. She told us to stay exactly where we were. For the next 3 hours, this invisible guardian angel steered a heavily armed stealth asset right through a raging storm, neutralizing enemy positions and marking a flawless extraction route through the dark. She saved all 11 of us. We only knew her by one name. I stepped closer to the table, looking directly at Marcus as the memories of that frantic, exhausting night rushed back into my mind. "Extraction Point Bravo?" I said softly, my voice carrying the exact same clinical, unwavering cadence I used in the command capsule. "You had 2 casualties. Your primary radio mast was completely severed by mortar fire, and you were down to your final 2 magazines of ammunition. Command thought you were already gone because the thermal imaging was blocked by the heavy mountain canopy, but I switched my array to an uncalibrated radar frequency to cut through the foliage." Marcus let out a ragged breath, his jaw dropping as the final piece of the puzzle locked into place. My dad looked between the two of us, his stubborn pride completely evaporating, replaced by a profound, stunned silence. The Tactical Command Center ordered me to abort and pull the asset back because the weather front was creating severe wind shears that threatened to crash the aircraft. I continued, keeping my eyes fixed on Marcus. But I knew if I pulled back, your squad wouldn't survive the night. I manually bypassed the automated stabilization limits, dropped the platform to a dangerously low altitude right beneath the cloud deck, and deployed the thermal markers to guide the choppers right into the throat of the valley. I watched you carry your sergeant onto the transport bird before I finally cleared the airspace. My dad sank slowly into a nearby patio chair, the spatula slipping completely from his hand and clattering onto the ground. He stared at me as if he were seeing a completely different person standing in his backyard. The daughter he had spent years patronizing, mockingly dismissing as a glorified gamer who played safe simulation videos, was the exact same unseen warrior who had single-handedly kept his military hero from coming home in a casket. The heavy silence hung over the patio like a thick fog. My dad sat completely motionless in his chair, his eyes wide as he looked at my hands. Hands he had joked only knew how to tap on keyboards, realizing they held the power of life and death. He opened his mouth to say something, to offer one of his usual quick-witted retorts or defenses, but the words completely failed him. The stubborn, old-school Marine sergeant had vanished, replaced by a father filled with a sudden, overwhelming wave of humility and awe. Beside him, Marcus slowly stood up straight. The casual, relaxed posture of the backyard barbecue tourist evaporated, replaced instantly by the rigid posture of an elite Navy SEAL commander facing a superior officer. Without a single word, Marcus raised his right hand to his brow, executing a flawless, razor-sharp military salute directed entirely at me. "Thank you for our lives, Captain," Marcus said, his voice thick with unshakable emotion. My dad watched this, his chest rising and falling heavily as a mixture of profound pride and deep regret flushed through him. He stood up slowly, walking over to me, and for the first time in my adult life, he didn't look down at me. He reached out, placing his calloused hands firmly on my shoulders, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I am so sorry, Lauren," he whispered, his voice trembling with genuine emotion. "I had no idea who my daughter really was. I've never been more proud." The years of hurtful taunts and dismissal faded away, replaced by an unbreakable bond of mutual, unspoken respect. That afternoon completely redefined my family, turning years of misunderstanding into a deep, quiet respect that completely changed how my father looked at me. He never joked about computer games again, and every time I visit, he asks about my day with a genuine, quiet pride in his eyes. It made me realize that sometimes the most critical battles we fight are the ones nobody else will ever see or fully understand. Now, I'm curious about all of you who are listening to my story today. What would you do if your own family completely underestimated the true weight and danger of your life's work? Have you ever had to keep a massive secret to protect the people you love? Comment below with the city you are watching from, so I can see how far our story has traveled. Meanwhile, click on the screen to watch 2 other favorite stories that will absolutely surprise you. Thank you for watching until the very end.